Let me just quickly. Oh yeah, we're live. So, yeah, I'm at Dreamforce. Just did like a live with the president CTO and downstairs, and I hope the stream was well because I didn't really see it from the audience end. So I hope audience can hear us, and then we will have like a professional video coming out soon. But Kathleen, welcome to Winter with Grace.
Thanks. Excited to be here.
Oh my God. So since like you are people's like favorite panelist at my conference.
Oh, well, thank you. That was a great event.
Thank you so much for coming. Okay, to start the show, I would love for the audience to kind of know you a little bit more. So you started your career at Facebook as a marketing manager. You have worked at Fox, Intercom, and you at one point you started your own fund called I'm KT1. Maybe we could, and then now you're a partner at Pear. Maybe we could start with like what were some core lessons that you've learned early on in your career, kind of shaping to who you are today.
Sure. It's a broad question. I'll try and call out a few things. So, I moved to the Bay Area in 2007. I think my first lesson that I learned was kind of before I actually moved out here. So, I went to college on the East Coast. I went to Brown, and at that time there wasn't as much awareness, I guess, of the tech scene on the East Coast as there is now. And I'm glad to see that that's changed a lot. But my older brother actually went to Stanford. And so he was working in tech. And that's what sort of got me excited and interested to come move out to the Bay Area and work in tech. That plus too many cold winters on the East Coast. And so I told him that I wanted to come out here and work in tech. And he was like, well, if you're serious, come out and I'll introduce you to some companies. And so in the spring of my senior year of college, I came out for a couple of days to the Bay Area, interviewed at a few companies, one of them being Facebook, and ended up getting a job offer at Facebook. I think the company was like 150 people at the time that I got my offer. And I didn't know what job I was interviewing for. And I was a political science and history major, so was not on the engineering side. And the job that I was interviewing for, I learned throughout the interview, was in customer support. And I was like, oh man, I don't want to do customer support. Like, I thought I was, above doing customer support. And then in talking to my brother after I got the offer, he was like, you're an idiot. Like, take the job. The company is growing super fast. And everyone that I met in that interview process who was also doing customer support were so smart and, incredibly talented and very passionate about the product. And so I ended up accepting the job, graduating from college, driving cross country with two of my friends, and living on my brother's couch in the garage in Mountain View for a couple months while I kind of figured out where I was going to live. But I think that lesson was the company was just on fire and doing incredibly well. And so it almost doesn't matter, particularly when you're early in your career, what the job is. As long as you're growing somewhere that's growing, you're going to have unfair opportunities. And so about 9 months into that, I ended up moving on to the PR comms team and got to do a bunch of really cool stuff. And then moved on to the marketing team from there and kind of got more and more opportunities, particularly for, the age and experience that I had. It was kind of a life-changing opportunity. And so I think sometimes people get a little too fixated on the particular role or, where you're landing, especially as a junior person or someone straight out of school. It doesn't actually matter. You just want to be surrounded by really smart people and have opportunities. And with growth of a company comes a ton of opportunities. And so I think sometimes you can get a little bit fixated. I think that goes to the second point of like throughout my career, it's like you want to be surrounded by the smartest people that you can, because you learn so much from the people that you get to work with. And so I think Facebook at that time was a total talent magnet. And I think about that now, like now at Pear, I'm working with one of my friends who started 2 weeks before me at Facebook, actually on the customer support team. And now she's running all of our founder ecosystem and community at Pear, this woman, Annie. And so I think the people that you get to work with at sort of key inflection points in your career, it's like carry them with you, because you never know when you're going to get to work with them again. And so I think that was one of the coolest things about Facebook at that time, was just everyone there was really smart. And we were all kind of growing up in our lives and careers together. And so we got to be really good friends. And then you never know when you're going to get to work with them again. And then I think, as you evolve in your career, you find different ways to work with people, and whether it's at a company or through partnerships, or, now a lot of my friends are also investors. And so you kind of get to collect people along the way. But I think that's the magic of Silicon Valley. And one of my other lessons is like, just, your reputation carries with you for many, years. And so
Mhm.
I think it's also important to kind of always do right by people and play the longer game and not kind of optimize for short-term things, because history is long. I was a history major, so maybe that's me, trying to use my degree in some way, but history repeats itself, and there's a lot you can learn from various generations as well. And so I think it's just I think it's a more fun way to go through life and career by kind of playing the long game and building relationships that are lasting and built on trust, integrity, and all those things.
For sure. I wonder, so like maybe we could talk about like I think your journey in from like customer service to marketing. I feel like customer service nowadays is like such a popular sector because all the like top YC company or like, Brett Taylor was doing
Yeah.
customer success, and then like Decagon, and then these like all the billion-dollar unicorns are started like really focusing on customer success. Maybe we could start with like, um what were some like kind of like key takeaway from that segment? Why is this like so popular? Obviously, it's like a huge market share,
Yeah.
and people were seeing customer success is like a huge where like enterprise spend their money.
Mhm.
Maybe we could talk about the industry in general, and then
Yeah.
we could obviously dive into marketing, which is like your specialty.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting because even at Facebook, we built our own
Mhm,
tools for customer support.
mhm,
I think actually customer support, if you can get that job as early in your career for
mhm,
Facebook, we all knew the product so well. And so
mhm,
I think it's a good launching point to go anywhere. Like
mhm,
I could go then do PR and comms because I could talk about
mhm,
the product. I had a bunch of user stories. Like it's a great way to learn the product. But from a tooling perspective, there were no good tools out there. And so our engineering team and internal tools team at Facebook actually built an internal tool for us. They called it TPS, which if you saw the movie Office Space was
mhm,
like, get me another TPS report, which might be dating me.
mhm,
But yeah, there wasn't a lot of good tooling. Then there was sort of the first gen of tooling like Zendesk and others that really, modernized a lot of this stuff. I mean, I worked at Intercom and we were doing, at the time I worked at Intercom, it was pre-Fin days, it was about 10 years ago. So we had the live chat, we had a marketing tool, we had a customer support product. So it was a multi-product company. But I think generally, the way that you talk to customers is the most important thing. And I think the reason people are investing it so much is because it's not really seen as a cost center anymore. It also is seen as like a revenue generator in a lot of ways, where if you have happy customers, you have repeat customers, retention matters because it's so hard to acquire people, that I think people are willing to invest in it because there's so much more that you can do when you have that relationship with the customer. And so that would be my bet of why it's such a big market. Which and it's kind of been done the same way for a long time. And I think now with AI and LLMs, there's such an opportunity, and I think there's an opportunity to use that in a less of just a cost center, but also as a potential revenue driver, which I
for
think is really
sure.
cool.
Totally.
Like at
Okay.
Market One, we invested in
Mhm,
a company called Plane.com,
mhm,
and they're doing great. They closed Cursor as a customer and some others.
mhm,
And I think it's just a very exciting time to be kind of spending time in that space because the tooling was pretty bad for a long
mhm.
time. Even the modern tools were not that modern. So
Yeah, for sure. I feel like there's like just so much challenge in this space just because like I feel like there's like people automating the call center, and then there's also the people who are like doing like the automatic messaging tools. Like there's so much solutions, but on the other hand, there's like I think the fundamental problem is like it's all like context driven, and then like there's so much like understanding issues that like even AI. Last week we had someone who was another customer support founder. They were saying things about like uh, because some of the issues people are reflecting are like, oh, domestic violence or something even bigger than customer success, and then like it need to be like escalated to um like a different team, and then like a bot cannot actually do that. So like a lot of these things are like very context driven, and
yeah.
it's like such a like
Well, and if someone's like a
in-
VIP customer, you want to get back to them faster. If,
yeah.
it's a very easy to, and that's where, I mean, even 18 years ago at Facebook, we were trying to do this where it was like, how do you automate away as many of the things that are like super repetitive that you don't actually need a human to do? And then how do you put a human where it is those more sensitive things and or the things that you need to double check, like identity and things like that. So, but the toolings come quite a long way, but the context matters. And I think the tiering of who this person is. But it's also interesting. Like I still believe that, you know, from a customer perspective, you don't actually care who you're talking to. You don't care if you're talking to AI. You don't care if you're talking to a human. You don't care if you're talking to, like, you just want the answer and you want the problem resolved. And so the fastest way to get that and in the most streamlined way, I think those kind of companies are going to win, because at the end of the day, the customer just wants, you know, the job done that they're, you know, the reason they're writing in as quickly as possible and done properly.
For sure. Okay, maybe we could talk about market one. So like, I guess like when you were starting your own fund, like what at that point, like since like I'm sure like I saw that you have done like first round angel, and then why don't we talk about like the shift between like being an operator to starting your own fund?
Yeah,
Which
it
is
was
very
not
impressive.
like an explicit decision. I would say it was sort of a slippery slope that got us there. So in 2020, for the, you know, pandemic had hit, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. I was interviewing at a few companies to join, you know, in leadership roles. I was actually talking to a few VCs, but I was not actually that interested, I think, at that time of joining venture. And then that was the time where everyone was home and kind of reconnecting with people that you'd known for a while. And so Emily Kramer and I had met in, I think, 2013 or 2014 when I was at Box, and she was at Asana. She was actually my sister's first boss at Asana, so that's how we met. And we had stayed in touch kind of in various roles. And she was also in transition. So we just started talking and, you know, sharing, oh, I'm interviewing at this company. Oh, I talked to this company. Like, what are you thinking you want to do next? And then we both kind of, after a few months of that and like not getting that excited about different things, we were like, you know what, let's just like go team up and start advising founders and see where this goes. And so in the fall of 2020, we ended up just kind of, you know, starting to, we incorporated Market One. It took us forever to figure out the name, which is funny now when startups are trying to name themselves. I'm like, oh, we did as marketers. I don't know that we did the best job, but it's fine.
I think it's a great one.
Oh,
It's
thank
like
you.
it's very
But
easy
no
to
one could
understand.
it was like, is it MKT1 or Market One? And so I went to an event and I was like trying to say MKT1, and then no one could they were
Understand.
like, MKT what? So then we were like, let's just write it MKT1 and call it Market One. But anyways, so we ended up just reaching out to our network and a lot of VCs actually, and saying like, hey, we're going to start advising startups. I love working with founders, particularly at the early stage. And then we're like, hey, we can help them. Let's like see where we can be most helpful, which most people who are not from marketing are like, oh, I don't know what that means. So one of the biggest learnings was like, we need to narrow down, like, when should they actually talk to us? And so we're like, okay, there's a few inflection points in a business. One is, you know, you have a few customers and you're starting to think about, how do I, you know, put more fuel on the fire? And so we're like, okay, once you're ready to like hire your first marketer or start investing in marketing, talk to us. And then two, when you're like trying to figure out like, what should my go-to-market or marketing strategy actually be? And so we tried to like reach out to our network and say, on these specific things, come talk to us. So then we met a bunch of companies and started helping them, and came away with a few kind of key things. One is, you know, most founders are not coming from a marketing background. Unfortunately, there's like not a lot of marketing founders. And two, most investors aren't either. And the biggest challenge that a lot of these companies had was around marketing. It's like, how do I position? How do I go talk to my customers? How do I think about distribution and getting more eyeballs coming to us? And so we ended up being very valuable to these founders and these companies. And then the other thing is, like, most founders were hiring the wrong first marketer, and that would just set them back. Be like, marketing's not working. It's like, well, who did you hire? And it's like, you hired some brand person with a CMO title at the seed stage. It's like, well, that's just a mismatch. I'm sure that person's very good, but they're just not good for you right now. And so we ended up helping a bunch of companies and then angel investing along the way. And through that, realized we kind of had unfair access because everyone needed help with this. And so what we were offering could get us, access to any of these companies. And then two, some of these companies we were really excited about and we weren't writing huge checks. And so we're like, we want to put more money into them. And so fast forward to 2021, when everyone was doing syndicates and SPVs, we ended up starting an SPV and then invested in a handful of companies through that and realized SPVs were fun, but they're actually also very challenging because you have to get LPs for every investment. And there's a set of companies that I think do really well in an SPV. It's like, the lead is someone that everyone knows. It's kind of more of a consensus bet to get LPs to invest in that. And so we were like, well, we're already doing all this work. Why don't we just raise a fund and then we can just make the investment decisions on our own? And so fall of 2021, actually right before I was about to give birth to my second kid, we decided to start a fund, which we were like, let's just go raise a proof of concept fund of $5 million and write 250K checks into these companies. And then we can help them with their marketing team and strategy and kind of scale ourselves up through that. And so at the same time, we also decided to invest in a newsletter because we were getting the same questions over and over. And so I think, similar to a lot of stuff you do, Grace, of like content marketing and building the brand matters a lot for kind of getting out there in a no-name fund. And so we invested a lot in kind of trying to position ourselves as like the experts on early stage marketing. And so grew a newsletter, reached out to all the lead investors that we knew, because a lot of times we were a collaborative check and we were kind of a no-brainer check to put in because we were going to help them with something that a lot of these bigger VC funds weren't really set up to help with in the detail that we did. And so we raised the fund. We ended up raising $6 million and we're off to the races. And so we invested in 35 companies out of that fund, and a few of them are doing quite well right now, which is awesome.
For sure. I wanted to learn more about like from the marketing angle. So like obviously nowadays, like everybody have a newsletter, a podcast. Like I know that during pandemic, it was like kind of the fast rising of all these like kind of like media initiatives. But nowadays, like everyone's like very bullish on this. It's like kind of like an obvious decision, which, A/Z have like 50 podcasts.
Yeah.
even Sakura has a podcast. Like it's like so crazy. So like how do you think about the differentiation nowadays, like as a marketer, like as also on the startup end, like literally I invested in one of the companies, Hyperspell, and they just got into YC. And then I was looking at their video. I was looking at everybody else at YC's video. It was so professional. It was very Netflix grade. I was like, I would watch this all day.
Yeah.
And I was like posting this on LinkedIn and spending like, a few $1,000s on these like videos. I wonder, as a marketer, is this like crazy or is this like actually a great investment?
It depends. I mean, I think the biggest kind of marketing learning is like not everything is going to work for everyone. And so you have to figure out and go do the work of like, why do you want to write a newsletter? What is your unique take that you're bringing to the market? Who is your newsletter actually for? So for us at Market One, as an example, our newsletter was for first marketers at early stage startups. We were like pre-seed through Series A. Sometimes that was to the founder audience because we were trying to get them to know who we were so that when we wanted to invest, they were like, oh yeah, I've read your stuff. Like we knew that gave us a lot of credibility. And so I think trying to do something very broad is really hard right now, unless you already have a brand. But I think going specific to your audience and your niche and becoming the best at that can work. But I think there's a couple of things you need to keep in mind. One, consistency. It's like you have to pick a cadence where you're able to meet, that cadence so that people can actually, start to listen to and or read what, and expect what you're delivering. Two is like you have to have a unique take or angle. You're competing with so much stuff, not just within tech, on TikTok, on Instagram. Like people have so much choice now that you have to be interesting enough and have something unique enough to say that people are going to tune in. And then I think the distribution of that matters. So I think Substack opened up a whole new channel for a lot of people. A lot of that content, though, gets distributed on LinkedIn. And so it's like, what is your distribution channel for this content that you're creating? You could have the best content, but if no one sees it, it doesn't actually matter. And so both of those things matter. So not just the content, but the distribution engine that you're building as well. And that was one of our key learnings. Like we would publish a newsletter, go out to everyone's emails, and then it wasn't until we posted the LinkedIn post that then, traffic spiked to that. And so I think you need to think about the distribution channels, but it is super noisy. And I think generally it's better to go on other people's podcasts like yours than to try and create your own, unless you have something very unique to say. And probably a better approach to going and starting one is like, go be a guest on a bunch of them. See if you have a unique take, you have a built-in audience already there, and then figure out if it's the right move for you. But I wouldn't jump straight to that. It's also, I mean, Emily and I used to talk to founders about this all the time, where they're like, we're going to start a podcast, or we want to like create all this content. It's like, create a newsletter. It's like, okay, go write the first 5 posts. If you don't have 5 good posts to do, then you probably aren't quite ready and don't have enough sort of unique takes yet, where it doesn't make as much sense. So
for sure.
Yeah. It's hard though. I mean, throwing it back to you, like, how did you decide to like create all this content? Like, what is your biggest distribution channel? I would imagine LinkedIn.
Yes, actually. Hi, Jillian. I want to say hi to her because she's awesome. Okay. Yeah. So I think like my biggest thing is like probably, I would say like it's doing kind of like both LinkedIn and podcasts. LinkedIn, we got like 10 million views in the past 365 days. And I think a lot of it is consistency. And when I decided to do this, I was like, one part is like my own journey of like learning, but also like I feel like I come from a different background. So like I come from a different country, and then I didn't have like any network in America in general. And that like when I moved to Silicon Valley, I feel like there are so many resources and there's so many great people here. I feel like I wanted to highlight their skill and like highlight their like lessons, so that like people around the globe could listen or like just learn. Like my younger self, like I feel like I just like, if I knew what the content was when I was like 15, I feel like at this point I'm like, I'm not saying I'm Elon Musk, but I feel like, I think the thing is like there's so many people are like very craving this type of knowledge, but it's like always like hiding behind closed doors, like only like a very select group of people ever heard of it. So that's why one of my passions to kind of like bridging the gap between like people who like wants to build something meaningful, but like they just didn't really know how. So that's how I kind of like decided to start. And then podcast is more towards like, hi Bob, wanted to say hi to people who comments. Okay, so I think the thing is like,
but that feels very authentic to you. Like that's your brand, and that's like so ingrained in your personality that it's like if someone else tried to use your playbook, it wouldn't work.
Yeah, I feel like it also have to be your own thing. Like if I start a newsletter, I'm pretty sure I'll flop. Like I started newsletter 17 times. Like, okay, you didn't hear it here. I shouldn't like just like expose myself. But it's like every day I wanted to start a newsletter. It was just not working. I feel like it was just like my personality. It was like not sit down and then reading something that's more than one paragraph. So if like the ChatGPT cannot TLDR for me, I will never read it. Like I do read the titles, right? So like for your newsletter or for like someone else's newsletter, I read the titles, I skim through, but like I don't think I'm like a newsletter guy. Like it's not a built-in feature for me. So I feel like it's also like selecting which channel works for you. It's also like very important.
And what like gives you energy? To your point, like I've had founders be like, oh, I want to like start writing content. I'm like, it is pulling teeth for your marketer to get you to write anything. So maybe written form is not the thing. Maybe you're better at like tweeting, crazy things out. Like
tweet crazy things.
Yeah, it's like Aaron Levy, best tweeter out there. Like, but that was like his, his strength. And so I think it's like figuring out what actually comes naturally to you, where you get energy from it, because otherwise it's never going to work. If you were asked to sit down and write a newsletter every week or every month, you'd be like, oh my goodness, this is so hard for me. Whereas if you were told to go talk to someone new every week and like ask all your, you have such curiosity, like go ask all your questions, then that gives you energy and you're going to keep doing it. And so I think that's
100%.
There's no one size fits all when it comes to marketing and figuring it out, but it's got to be the thing that you actually are good at and have a unique perspective, and that gives you energy so you actually keep doing it. Because if you do like a bunch of one-off things, you're not going to actually, a lot of marketing compounds. And so you have to build that base and just keep going.
I have a hard question for you. So it's like, it will be a very easy one for you because I feel like you think about this every day. But okay, so if we are starting a B2B SaaS startup. Let's call it customer success just to make it relevant. So like, what would be 3 things that you do for this startup to get traction? So, oh, also, by the way, let me add more context. So every day, like it's not every day, like, so in the past, like I've done like, a bunch of intro calls, like everyone's asking the same question. How do I reach out to investors? Right. So like if I have no, like if I live in, I don't know, a rural area, or like I just like don't have investor in my network, or I live in London, I'm building something that's like, a Shopify equivalent, or like the AI version of agentic Shopify or Cursor for writing or whatever. So like, and then how do I reach out to the investors? Like how should I kind of like leveraging marketing to actually get user, get investor? What should I do first to actually getting my first check?
Yeah. I think there's different questions. So on the how do I get my first users? I think it's like figuring out who are you building for, go have a bunch of conversations. And a lot of that is just kind of founder led. In the beginning, it's like founder led
Mhm.
sales, like cold outreach and just getting a few design partners to then figure out
Mhm.
what pain are you solving for whom. And then once you have some sense of that, then finding the next 10 people who have that problem and the next 100 people who have that problem and having a compelling, interesting message around that. A lot of it is product marketing, which is actually how I grew up in my marketing career, is like, understanding like what is our unique value for whom and why they should actually care. And then from that, once you understand who those people are, figure out what other tools are they using? Do they all go to some conference that you should then maybe go to? Do they all read some newsletter? Are there like micro influencers in that network that you should then, become friends with? When I, at my last startup before I started Market One, Scalar, we were selling to the DevOps team, but we were selling to kind of the VP of engineering, CTO, or head of kind of platform engineering. And so we started hosting these dinners with 2 or 3 kind of well-known engineering leaders around topics that were super top of mind for them. And we'd invite 10 to 12 of these, VP level people to come have dinner with us. And our CEO there was, he was one of the founders of Rightly, got acquired by Google, became Google Docs. He was like an incredibly talented engineering leader, this guy, Steve Newman. And he was a draw, plus the 2 or 3 other people we had. And our other insight there was like, these senior people are not going to conferences. Like they're the ones speaking at the conferences, and they actually have a lot of questions for their peers that they never get to, they're so busy, they never have the time to do that. So we had a really nice restaurant that people wanted to go to, and then 1 or 2 or 3 anchor people that they would be excited to come. And then we would send out the list, like, here are all the people you're going to meet. And so for that demographic, that marketing strategy actually worked. But I think for every company, it's like figuring out who is your
ICP.
who's your ICP, and then not just like why they should care about your product, but what else is going on in their, day to day. What other tools are they using? Maybe you partner with one of those companies that has a complementary tool to you, and you do something with them. So I think that it's a lot of just like product marketing and really understanding the customer and not just your tool. A lot of times it's like, don't just sell me this thing, like understand my problem and then understand how your solution fits into the context of what I actually care about. And I think that will give founders a good sense of like, am I building a vitamin or a painkiller? Like if no one's responding, then maybe the pain is just not there for what you're offering. And you need to go back to the drawing board to figure out how your product becomes a lot more mission critical. And then in terms of reaching investors, I mean, I think it's hard if you don't have any sort of like warm connections. But I will say this, like I think a lot of investors, and myself included, get a ton of inbound, and a lot of it is just, AI kind of slop emails. Those go directly to delete. But if someone writes a really thoughtful email where it's like somewhat personalized to me and or why it could be a good fit at Pear, and like actually does the work, then I'm a lot more likely to at least look at it. And oftentimes sending a deck is helpful, so then it's like I can see whether it's going to be a fit for us or not, or at least worth a conversation. The other thing I'll say for Pear, at least, like we run an accelerator called PearX, and we have an open application process. So we run applications twice a year, in the fall, and we're doing application review right now, and in the summer. And so if you don't have a huge network, I think places like PearX are a great place to get seen, because if you have a strong application, we're going to talk to you. So I think there's, we're not the only accelerator in town. There's a bunch of other ones, but I will plug the Pear one. But I think those are another good avenue if you don't have like a huge network in, Silicon Valley quite yet.
For sure. I wonder, obviously, I think like trying to get into a Pear X would be a question on itself. So, because I'm like pretty sure, like just to get into the Pear fellowship, so like I'm kind of like I never want to call myself a mentor, but I am a mentor for a lot of like younger people who are like trying to break into VC. And then even they went to like the best schools, like they have the best grade, they're like the most like networked, outgoing, bubbly guy or girl on their campus, but they can't get into Pear fellowship. So how, like, what would be your advice for them, or like for the people who are trying to get into a Pear X? Like, how should they market themselves to kind of like stand out among the crowd?
Yeah, I think there are two different things. So we have Pear Fellows, which are kind of like our scouts on campus. If you don't get into that, my advice is go start a company, or like go operate at a company. I think a lot of younger people want to get into VC, and I think you're a lot more value. It depends. Like there's so many different successful types of VCs. Like I loved operating, and I think being an operator in your early career is so valuable, and it makes you it helps you build a bigger network. It helps you see what great looks like if you end up at a good company. It helps you give better advice, I think, to founders, because you've kind of lived it. So I think there's a rush for some people to get into venture on the younger side. And I tell this to a lot of young people. I'm like, go find a great company and do that, because I think then eventually, if you want to get into venture, you'll just be a lot better at it. And have a lot more kind of context to help founders. But there's a lot of young, great, successful VCs, so not to discount them. But I think that things that stand out, I mean, I think it's like, where have you seen excellence? Like, where have you spiked and leaning into that? What have you done that's like exceptional and different? I think also, do you have some sort of like unique perspective here that is different than the 50 other people that are applying? But I would say don't get discouraged. Young people these days are so successful, so young. It's kind of crazy. And so if it doesn't, I didn't become into venture until much later in my career. And so I think that there's many paths, and if one door closes, like, don't be afraid to like try maybe a different path if the first one doesn't work. So it is crazy. I mean, I'm reviewing PearX apps right now, and just the quality of founders right now is insane. And a lot of the young people are just they're so young and have done so much that it's wild. So it's okay if it takes you, a few tries.
What, I guess, like when you're reviewing these like PearX apps, like do they have to be a quote unquote second time founder when they're like 18? Just because I
No,
feel like,
not at all. I think
like
it's like a unique insight. It's like, why are you building what you're building? It's the same for any type of founder, whether you're 18 or you're 40. Like, I think it's like, why are you building this company? And so I think the other hard thing is there's so many more companies being built right now. There's like 50 in every category that are started, and so I think it's, what is your unique take? Why are you going to win? And actually, I think a lot of the go-to-market stuff matters here, where you meet them and you're like, okay, how are you going to get unfair distribution here? Because there's 50 other companies that exist here. Your product might be really good, but if you can't win on distribution and getting people to use the product, it doesn't actually matter. And so you need all of these things. It's not just an either or at this point. And so, it's hard though. Like and the other thing is, if VCs say no to you, the best way to get back at them is get traction. Because if you come back to me 3 months later and you're like, hey, we actually like made a ton of progress. I had one PearX interview yesterday where the team I had met in the last batch, they were super early and hadn't launched yet. They launched, they got to top of product hunt this time. And I'm like, wow, amazing progress. Like now we're looking at it again. So just because someone says no, like the best way to get them to relook at you is to make some progress and get traction, because traction, we're wrong so much of the time, but your customers aren't wrong if they're paying you. So go get
Yeah,
them to pay you.
exactly.
And then we'll relook at it.
For sure. I guess like what type of traction do you feel like matters more? Is that like we have like a million user, but we have no revenue, or would it be like we have some sort of revenue, but it's kind of like unpredictable because like everyone call it like
There's like
ARR,
no hard and
MRR.
fast rule for us in Pear. And PearX can have anything from like nothing, like we invest pre-incorporation, like oftentimes we have to wait for them to actually get incorporated as a company before we can wire the money, to like, hey, we have, a couple 100K in revenue, and we might get to $1 million in revenue in the batch. So we kind of see the spectrum. And I think for us, the criteria is like, is this a top 1% founder building in a big enough market? And sometimes, honestly, we'll meet founders who we think are awesome. They might not be building in a big enough market, or we don't think it's a big enough market. And so we'll ask them like, hey, how do you think about this market? We don't think this is big enough. How do you think about it? Because that's, and I think really smart founders can kind of either realize it's not a great market and move to something else, or they see it in a different way than we do. So
I have another question. Thank you. Sorry, my team just gave me coffee.
oh, nice.
Like you need this. Yeah, I couldn't sleep last night because like today. Before this, I will like I have like so many questions for you. Okay, so let's talk about SaaS. So in terms of marketing a SaaS company or like a marketing an AI company, besides making a really amazing launch video on your YC page, like what is the next move? Like, because I actually feel like this is the opposite of my personal approach. I think the repetition is better than you have like a better video. Even you have like a 1 million video, like 1 million view video. I have a 1 million view video, but like my life did not change whatsoever. But like it's all about like these like continuous like day to day showing up kind of phase. And I feel like this is a longer process. Like, so, I mean, when I started my podcast, I was like comparing this to like 20 VC or like all these like other podcasts who are like there. But I was like looking at Jason Calacanis. I mean, like I feel like he has been there in forever, and then this is like a marathon, and then I feel like this is kind of like the game that you have to play for like 20 years, and like you can't go like sprint into like a one banner video. But nowadays, like I think the kids are like very cracked because like look at Cluey every day it's a banner video. But I think the marketing budget is gonna run out, so I don't know like how you kind of like how do you think about marketing fundamentally for these like B2B SaaS startups, and should they be besides creating like amazing TikTok, like what are some other ways to like kind of build the distribution?
Yeah. I think that it's easy to point to the like super flashy kind of things. But I think, you said it. Like, I think these things, it's like you need a good foundation, then you need to compound on that, and you need to be always experimenting. Because once something, it's like you grow, then what you were doing doesn't work and you kind of plateau, and then you have to figure out something else and you grow. Like, I've been at hyper growth companies. They never went like this. They always went like this. Like there were points in time at Facebook. Like when I joined Facebook, we were 15 or 20 million users, and MySpace was 115 million users. And there were times where we were churning more users than we were growing. And so it's never just like it like happens and it goes, it doesn't really, very rarely does it actually happen that way, if at all.
The same thing said by the superhuman founder yesterday. So he was on our show, and then he said that like there's no truly viral product. It's always like kind of like a journey, basically.
Yeah, I think
the journey part is my favorite.
I think you need to be thinking about distribution. Like, how do I get unfair distribution? How do I get, and some of that can be like through the product. Like if your product lends itself to product-led growth, like how do you create some sort of network effect or product-led growth within it? Sometimes it's an ecosystem thing. Like at Market One, we invested in a company called Anrock. They do SaaS sales tax. They're growing super fast because there's a regulation that changed where every company now has to figure out how to do sales tax across all 50 states. And so they leaned into that from a marketing perspective, did a ton of content marketing around helping companies figure out how to do this. And so, they're seeing great traction there. I think sometimes there's these founders that are just amazing marketers. Like you could say the Cluely guys are. I think if any other founder tried to play that playbook, it would fail miserably because it's not innate with them. It's not authentic. You'd just be copying what someone else is doing. And so I think it's also, you might get the million views, but if none of your customers watch videos on TikTok, then it doesn't actually mean the business is working. It means you're getting a bunch of viral moments, but maybe you should be building a consumer app instead of a B2B app. Like, I think it also matters, like, how does that translate and into the funnel? And is that where your customers actually are? And so I think you need to measure your marketing, but it shouldn't be measured in short term. It should be measured, like a lot of these things. It's like you do it once, it doesn't work. Okay. You need to give it enough time to work, and you need the consistency for it to work. And so I think that's one of the things where in this moment where everyone feels like you need to go from, 0 to $1 million in revenue in 3 months, like some businesses just don't work that way. And that's okay, as long as you're building a good fundamental business. So I think those are the things that, founders need to be reminded. Don't just read the TechCrunch or, information articles about the fastest growing things. Like, most companies don't do that, but you want to just make sure that, you are growing fast, but, with durable revenue, which I think matters as well.
I have another question on the investing side. So like one thing is like, among all these like different AI applications and infrastructure, dev tools. Maybe we could talk about like the trends that you're seeing
Mhm.
from these like maybe Pear applications, as that's
Mhm.
kind of like on top of our mind right now. And what are some major trends that you're seeing? What are people building in general? And
Mhm.
then what are, let's call it like 3 subcategory that you're bullish about?
Yeah. So the way that we do Parax apps, we're generalist investors, and then the applications kind of get routed to different partners. So I'm looking at B2B ones. This week in particular, I've seen a lot on, well, I see a lot of MarTech companies. So I think naturally, there's a lot of people trying to like reinvent, I guess, kind of how you do marketing. I think marketing is fundamentally changing. I think everyone understands that. The question is how, and then what is the right kind of wedge to get in. I'm seeing a lot of products this week around recruiting, and like how people think about, the recruiting process, finding good candidates, assessing them. I think that's something that's actually pretty top of mind to a lot of the CTOs that I'm talking to. Is like, they're interviewing all these candidates. Everyone's using AI tools to code. How do you then change your hiring process to make sure that the people that you're interviewing can do the work, but also use all the modern tools? So I think that's kind of top of mind. And then there's a bunch of vertical stuff that's very specific. I've seen this week, weirdly, a lot of companies that are doing stuff for like car dealerships. I don't know why that happens to be the flavor of this week. But I think some of these like super vertical solutions, starting with some pain point. There's a lot of like video or front desk kind of things. And then I think a lot of people are, one space that I think is interesting, you're at Dreamforce, is like, what does the future of a CRM look like? And
Yeah.
curious kind of what the buzz there is, because I think there's a lot of people, I think it's the most vulnerable it's been in the last like 20 to 30 years. But I think it's also like, it's really hard to just bite off that whole category. And so I think we're going to see some interesting things happen here in the next few years, whether it's like vertical specific things, orchestration layers on top. But it's an area that I'm interested in, but I think it's like also quite hard.
Yeah, 2 trends from Dreamforce, since we're streaming right here.
Yeah.
I just heard of the CTO, and then I feel like his opinion was like, nowadays like Dreamforce is actually building beyond, or like not Dreamforce, Salesforce is building beyond the traditional like CRM. So like there's like, like you said, like agent orchestration layer,
Mhm.
and then people, and then the cohesive message. I also been to like the Madrona IA40 summit. I feel like combine these learnings is like there's 3 things. One is like, I think like people used to build for human. Nowadays, people have to manage AI. So like
Yeah.
AI agent is like a part of your employee team now. Like, so which agent have what kind of access to what, and then who is managing who is like a very important
Mhm.
new thing. And that like in our 100 list, we have a company called Wayfund, which is actually presenting at Salesforce right now. Started by the former chief product officer of Nextdoor, who is also
Mhm.
on our podcast. She like her entire company is building the agent orchestration space. It's just like a agentic PM managing other agents.
Yeah.
So I feel like this is like a new trend that I'm personally seeing. And then the other part is like, I think one of the other part is like, I think everybody's like building beyond their original workforces. So like I was looking at these different companies like Writer or like, Glean. So like a lot of people starting in one area, but
Yeah.
expand into like different areas within internally. So, and when you are mentioning about the market size, I think that's a different problem. Is like, I think in the future, we probably see a different market. Like, in the past, maybe people are dominating, I don't know, the CRM market, but in the future, maybe there's no CRM market. It's just becoming the cursor for customer service, like,
Yeah.
which is like every day I'm hearing the cursor for X, cursor for
Yeah.
Y. So,
But don't you remember, history repeats itself? It was like, I'm the Uber for this, or I'm the
yeah,
Airbnb for that. It's like
yeah,
every 10
so
years, there's a new
crazy.
analogy. So
New thing, new thing.
oftentimes I'm like, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, exactly. Or what does it mean in general? I was like,
Yeah.
damn, like, yeah. Yeah, also hi Ariane. Okay, so another question when you were when you were talking to me, I wrote down reinventing the SEO. So like you were saying about reinventing marketing, but I think the other part is like, what do you see as the future of marketing? Because right now it's like in the past, it's like people are trying to rank higher on Google or Amazon or whatever, but like nowadays it's like they have to rank higher on Perplexity,
Yeah.
ChatGPT, Anthropic. How is that going to kind of change? And then where is the marketing dollar going to shift to? Is that going to shift to like we're going to pay Perplexity to rank us higher in our original search, which is actually based on Google? So
Yeah. Yeah.
how does that work in general?
Yeah, we actually had a company in the last Pear batch that I work closely with called GeoStar that's doing generative engine optimization. I think SEO is changing so much and becoming GEO or AEO, however you want to, whatever acronym you want to, but it's changing. And I think the old way of searching, it's insane. Like, the old results of having like 20, now it's like 3 to 5, and they're maybe not the same. And so I think every company needs to be thinking about this and using, the latest tooling. Otherwise you're going to become invisible or you already are invisible. And the search, and that's going to happen. It's like happening slow and then it's going to happen really fast, I think. And so, yeah, a lot of these old channels just are not necessarily working. But I mean, I think that there is opportunity here then for people to kind of change the way that they think about it. And I do think that one of the things that I've been thinking about is, a lot of marketing spend has gone to agencies. If you look at most marketing teams' budgets, sometimes it's tooling, it's like the HubSpots, Webflow, WordPress, and then, some of the outbound tooling, things like that. But then a big budget item is agency spend, whether it's like performance marketing, SEO. Like the big SEO market is not the tooling, it's actually on the agency side. And so that's been sort of top of mind for me of like, okay, in the past, all this money was going to agencies. Agencies were inherently limited by people and having enough humans to go do the work. But now if you built an agentic agency where there's maybe a couple people that then are the orchestration layer underneath that and all the work is done by agents, then could you scale this agency infinitely? Where on the front end, you're an agency because marketers just want the work done. But on the back end, you're like, this team of this swarm team of agents.
That's what I'm building myself right now.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I mean, this is what
very slow,
this is what GeoStar is doing is like on the front end, they're going to market as an agency because that's what people are used to. On the back end, they're building, this whole ambient agent that's constantly updating all of your GEO stuff. And like when a new update comes out, you don't even have to have a human in the loop to do it. And so I think that is a lot of how marketing is changing. I think there's an open question of like, can someone build the super marketing AI platform, or is it always going to be somewhat fragmented? Because brand marketing is pretty different than performance marketing, which is pretty different than content marketing. So can someone piece all these things together and do them all well? Or are you going to have to then orchestrate across a few different tools that are best in class at the thing that you need it to be best in class at. And so I don't know, like, I think it's yet to be determined, but everyone is starting somewhere. And then every company is trying to go into each other's space. And so I think, we'll see how this plays out in the next couple of years. But I think some of these markets on their own are big enough such that, big companies can be built here.
For sure. So for the audience who is curious, so GEO is a generative engine optimization, and then AEO is answer engine optimization.
I think they're the same category, just different people were calling them different things because it's so new, but it's the same bucket in my mind. But yeah, different people came up with different acronyms.
I love that.
And all of SEO is going to move there anyways, because if you're still only doing SEO, then you're kind of going to get left behind. So all the SEO products and companies are all thinking about this stuff and making progress towards it too.
Can I ask, like, what is the difference? I'm currently open a graph of like the difference between SEO and GEO. So like, how is people search differently? How am I gonna kind of like rank higher on like ChatGPT, basically?
Well, so I think they pull from different things. So like, I think ChatGPT, I mean, and all this stuff is changing. So I'm not the world's best expert to tell you specifically, but it's like they will reference. Here's an example. I was talking to someone maybe a year ago about, I've never been a big fan of press releases. I think they're kind of a waste of time for most startups because they're very formulaic. No one really cares. Most people will just end up reading your blog post. But in this GEO world, if you have something go over the wire, it is seen as like a very credible source. And so it might actually reference you higher by having a press release than maybe only having a blog post. And so my mind has changed on something like that. It's like a small example, but it's like, then you want to be mentioned in some of these more credible places. You want to be seen as an authority, and it's your stuff plus third party. And so I think that's where some of this stuff is changing. But the GEO stuff is so dynamic right now, and it's constantly changing, and it kind of depends on OpenAI. You might rank somewhere versus Perplexity versus, like everything is sort of different. And so that's where you kind of have to figure out, using some of these tools to figure out like, where do you need to prioritize and what type of content, or where do you need to be such that you rank higher?
I have another question, piggyback on the thought of ranking higher. You mentioned about like the credibility of the source and then the release and stuff like that. So a startup came to me last week. They're very like, they raised like hundreds of millions of dollars, but like very fast. Like they're very kind of like a unicorn on its own, still very early stage. But they are thinking about like hiring that marketing agency, like you mentioned, like agency takes most of the money. But like people want to guarantee like, hey, can I be featured on Forbes? Can I be featured on Fortune? Like, or TechCrunch even. So like, or information. So like, how do you think about like, spending the budget? Like, so how much of the budget should be spending on these like traditional media versus like, these kind of the paid versus the earned, and like, how would you kind of like help a startup to budget these kind of budget? And then is there any, like, I don't want to name specific agencies, but I guess like thinking about like, how do you kind of like pick your own agency to work with as a startup when you first like,
I think so. You're asking like, if it's like a PR agency, most early stage startups are a little bit too early. Where it's like 20 grand minimum a month,
right?
Yeah, per month. And so like a lot of these places, you're not going to get like the A team to work with you. And then it's like actually not that useful. I also think there comes a time where like you need that as a layer on top of what you're doing, but there's a bunch of stuff you can do before that is not as is not as costly. And so I think post Series A, maybe Series B, you start to think about it. But I think before that, it's not worth the time and money, because there's so many other ways to like sort of get out there. I think when you're picking agencies broadly, you want to find an agency that is right sized for your company. And so if you are a seed stage company, don't go hire the agency that like Facebook and Google use, because they are paying 1,000x more than you. Their budgets are much bigger. They're going to get the A team. You're going to get the D team, frankly, and you're not like important to that agency. And so when you're interviewing an agency, ask them about the other companies that they're working with. Are those companies similar stage size to you, such that, you know, like you're a good fit for them and they're a good fit for you? The second thing is meet the team that you're actually going to be working with. You might interview an agency with the top people and they're awesome, and then they outsource it to like a different team that's actually working with you. I think it's really important to meet every person who's going to be working on your account, and not just the top people. And so, who is my team? And then making sure that you're specific there. I think also a lot of times agencies have a little bit of scope creep where they're like, oh, we can do that. Like I was talking to one company like a year or two ago, and they were like, oh, our PR agency is now doing our website. And I'm like, what? That's insane. They're probably not good at it, and they're probably charging you a bunch of money for it. And so you want to find the right agency for the job that you need done and get the best agency to do that job. Don't just try and find an agency who will do everything, because they're not going to do anything well. And so that's the whole point of hiring an agency versus doing it in-house, is you're getting that expertise on the thing that you need the expertise on. And that's why you would actually go to an agency. And so I think right sizing the budget, finding people that are going to fit within it. If someone quotes you like 3x the price than you're willing to spend, they're not the right fit for you. And if you try and negotiate them down, they're not going to do good work. And so you also want to make sure that your budget fits, you know, their sort of scope as well. Otherwise, you know, there's misalignment and you're not going to get the best product.
For sure. How do you decide on like hiring an agency versus in-house? Like, should you hire like the first marketing guy, and then are they supposed to be like, I mean, from my perspective, I'm personally like a scrappy person. I do everything myself. Is that guy supposed to run everything themselves, or like how do you even hire the first marketing person?
Yeah.
Oh, another thing, real life example, like a consumer AI company, they're trying to hire someone who's like a TikToker as CMO. Is that good or not?
Usually not, because they don't. If all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Like your first marketing hire needs to be generalist. They have to be across. They have to be across like the product marketing, the growth marketing, the brand marketing. They have to be good at all of those things, and then they should spike where you need the most help. I think now with AI tools, there's a lot that a solo marketer can do by hiring the AI tool to help you. And then you hire an agency to help you with specific things. I think it's really hard to hire a bunch of agencies that then don't report to someone at a company. I think that fails more times than it works, because you need all of that to come from a strategy that's being managed by a marketer in-house. And so if you have 5 different agencies, it might be time for you to actually hire someone in-house where it feels like there's enough work, because you want a cohesive strategy. But I think hiring someone who's oftentimes, this is like the number one thing that founders are like, we just need more top of funnel. And I'm like, well, what does your funnel look like? Because it might actually be a conversion issue more than a top of funnel issue. Because if you have a super leaky bucket, that's actually a product marketing problem, not a growth problem. And so you need someone who can see both, such that they can actually diagnose what's working and what's not working. And I think that by hiring more of a generalist marketer who is proficient with AI tools, you cannot hire anyone who is not proficient in AI tools as a marketer these days. I think it's like table stakes. And so I think, but having that breadth of experience is super important, because otherwise, you know, they're just not going to be able to actually help you move the needle.
For sure. Okay, I want to wrap with one quick fire round here.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, what's your favorite book?
My favorite book? I love Shoe Dog, because I grew up in Oregon.
Same. Yeah. Oh wow, I didn't grow up in Oregon.
Yeah, I grew up in Portland, where Nike is larger than life.
Oh
so yeah.
Yeah, I love Nike. I love Shoe Dog. It's like definitely life changing. Who made the biggest impact in your career?
Oh, probably my parents.
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
Invite to my dinner party? My family.
I love that. Where can we find you outside of work?
I have 2 kids, so I'm chasing them around. I'm actually coaching soccer right now for my daughter.
Oh my God.
And then I run, I swim, and I play pickleball. So Usually outside. I'm
Yes.
outside if I'm not in the office.
Love that. Okay, so what's one AI tool you couldn't live without? That's not ChatGPT. You can't say
Yeah,
ChatGPT.
I think the two I can't live without. One is Granola and the other is Howie. I use Howie for all my scheduling.
Love that. Well, Kathleen, thank you so much for coming to our show today. Sorry about my chaotic background noise. I don't know if there's noise, but I'm pretty sure like I don't know if Mark Benioff is coming on stage right now or whatever. It's like I don't know if you can see the background. Oh, last question. Actually, this at lunchtime and noon, I'm actually going live with the CM of Slack. What should be a question I ask him?
As in what tools they're actually using on their, you said it's a CMO?
Yeah.
What tools are they actually using on their team? What are their top 3 tools?
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'll include this.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Super
Yeah.
appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Let me